we're on to our next topic. Laura, Tanya, what would you tell your 20-year-old self? So how did we come up with this topic? I have a niece at the moment living with me, and we obviously she's got university, or she's got studies at the moment, and she's also working, and life of a 20-year-old can be quite hectic. I started to think about, oh my God, what was I doing in my 20s? Was I actually that put together? No, not that I remember. Was I not put together, or was I put together? I really don't know in what facts I really was organised or not organised as I am today, or I think I am today. And then she started to talk to me about, what was it like when you were 20? And then I thought, you know what? Does everyone need to know this? Does everyone want to know this? I want to know this. So, what a better way to do it than talk about it?
Absolutely. And when we kind of started discussing this topic, which is very, very interesting, we decided who better to bring on to have a discussion about it but Tanya Meessmann. So she is the founder and CEO of Fuel Girl-Shaped Flames, an absolute advocate for gender equality, someone who, after mentoring young girls throughout her career, decided that it was time to do something about developing young girls and really putting some effort into the next generation of females coming through the ranks. And now she works with girls in their most formative years, introducing them to strong female role models, and really kind of working with them interactively through events and workshops, etc., to give them the life literacy skills that they need to go forth in their 20s and do amazing things in the world.
So welcome, Tanya.
Thanks.
Thank you. Great to be here.
So we wanted to ask you, first of all, to tell us a little bit about what you do, and a little bit about what you're seeing, because I guess if we think back to, we start from what you mentioned before, Pauline, when we were 20 and what we were up to, it is a little bit different now, right?
Yes. Yeah, it is. But what I find interesting is that so much of the advice and guidance that we would have been given in our 20s is still pertinent today, because it's all based in still very life relevant things. But I think if you want to go off on a bit of a Gen Z kind of angle, so anyone born after 95 is a Gen Z, so it's kind of 23-year-olds and under, around about. They are a really interesting generation to look at from the pressurization. So if you think back with something like terrorism, we were all in our late teens, early 20s when September 11 happened. So we'd had a lot of life already, being quite sheltered from the idea of that. But anyone who was born in 95 onwards has lived with terrorism as part of their lives forever, whether that's actually in their everyday life or just on the news and just a thing. If you think about financial crises and financial pressure on the world, again, we ran a pretty sweet deal up until 2008. And then any of these kids in 2008, even the kids born in 95 or 2000, they're in their tweens when the financial crisis hit. So they've also lived in a world where there's always been some sort of financial instability. They've watched their parents lose jobs. They've watched, they've had to move houses or move schools. So then you layer on top of that technology and social media and the fact that now their lives are constantly being shared with everyone, constantly being judged, sometimes, positively and supportively, but a lot of the times there's just the opportunity for so much comparison that we just didn't have. But one of the interesting things that I see is that we talk about now in sort of the circles I run in working with the girls, is that back in the day, if you look at, what's happening with the environment, what's happening with even slavery or any of the not nice things about life, we were exposed to those things when the morning newspaper got delivered and mum and dad would open it up. You'd normally just flick through the cartoons or something, but that was your exposure. And then night, the 6 o'clock news or 7 o'clock news for half an hour. Yeah. And that was it.
Which was so limited.
And it was their little 30-second bites. This is kind of happening. Now, the girls get up, they're on Instagram, or anyone. It's not just the girls I work with. Anyone gets up, you're on Instagram, you're on Facebook, you're on everything. And the moment you wake up, you're absorbing the world's pain, essentially, right? Yeah. So I have girls coming to me that are so
determined to fix the world and determined. And I think back going, oh my God, when I was 13, I was saving up money to buy a boombox or something. That was my priority. These girls are saving up money to like save the orangutans and all the rest of it. So I think going back to the point about why the girls are feeling so much stress and pressure, I think there's a multitude of different forces at play that were not the same for us when we grew up. And then also you layer on top of that lots of job fragility, lots of not knowing what the world is like out there. They're being brought up by millennial parents now, like some of the older millennials. And, you know, we all know what the world is like out there. It's crazy and dynamic and fast moving and da-di-da. And so they're then sitting there panicking, going, oh my God, how do I prepare to have 20 different jobs? What if I don't know what I actually want? And so we look back at our lives and go, well, it felt like it was simpler back then and I don't know why. It's like, well, that's why. We didn't have terrorism in our life yet. We didn't have financial crisis. We didn't have social media. We went out and did our Bachelor of Arts or our Bachelor of Business or our Bachelor of Law thinking, well, that's the path I'm going to go on.
You know, I think that's, you've just hit the nail on the head, because I was trying to wrap my head around what was different between when I was 20 versus now for my niece who's going through it. She's literally just turned 20. And the pressure and what she tells herself in regards to what she must be and must be doing is so different to how I felt, which is why I want to know, like, okay, so Laura, maybe we'll start with you. What were you doing in your 20s that's different?
There's things I can and can't say on the podcast.
Oh, come on, tell us.
But no, I think I was doing a lot of travel. I left uni at 21, and then I went and I had no clue what I wanted to go and do, and just knew that I wanted to go and see the world and see as much of it as possible. So I did a lot of travel, but there was always that pressure of, okay, well, this has got to come to an end at some point, and what are you going to go and do next? I called 30 my scary age because I thought, well, before then, I don't really need to worry. I can just kind of go and live free and do what I need to do, or do what I want to do. So I think how I remember at 20 years old, I was excited, I'm a little bit scared. I had the safety net of university around me, but at the same time, I knew that I was probably, you know, a year away from really going out into the big wide world, and I was saving up for travel and just excited about what I could do.
See, that's really amazing. So you kind of had the awareness and rationale to sort of take the risk on how much you would spend living free, and then kind of gave yourself a timeline, which is really quite interesting. Yeah. And then I think about, Tanya, what you just said before, you know, the Gen Z and what they've been exposed to. And then, yeah, I saw my niece and my stepdaughter this morning. I woke them up early, as I always do, go into their room, they're already on their phones. And I look back, what pressure did I have in my 20s? I think the only pressure I had was, how can I go out by Wednesday, Thursday, Friday and keep the money going the whole time for my $2 drinks that I could get on student night. That's pretty much about the only pressure I had. The pressure I had from my parents, which again was, they lived overseas, so it was pretty different for me. And then the pressure I think that I had was mainly from my immediate peer group that I surrounded myself with, which really wasn't much at all, because I had like-minded 20-year-olds. I didn't have, you know, the 35-year-old superstar who's on Instagram posting selfies, who looks absolutely flawless, and me, I'm just trying to cope with my next pimple. Yeah. So I think, yeah, it just really puts it into perspective.
No, and I think, you know, you hit the nail on the head there as well. I think, you know, when we talk about our 20s, it was full of hope, and it was full of, oh, what could we go and do next? And the opportunities were endless in our brains. We were actually quite naive. You come out of uni and you're thinking, oh my God, I don't know what I'm going to do, but I'm not afraid of it. Yes. Whereas I think, and there's no one really to compare to, you're just about to go on your journey. Whereas now, I think there's this pressure of, by the time the scary age isn't 30 anymore, it's, well, I'm looking at these 21-year-olds who are currently, you know, got their own private jet, and they're doing this and they're doing that, and they've got their own business, and I need to be like that.
I want to be the next Jenner, who's a billionaire, the youngest
next Instagram
billionaire
influencer. And the next this, and I want to go here, and these people are doing this, and I honestly think
it is a lot of pressure.
It's a lot of pressure.
What were you doing? Tell us about
My
what were
20s.
you feeling?
In my 20s, I was very, I've always been quite ambitious. And I think when we talk about pressure, for me, the pressure I always felt in my 20s was just pressure I was putting on myself because I have high ambitions and standards and I always wanted to achieve. And so I would always be thinking, how can you get this next great opportunity? But I mean, I share the sentiment in that for me, even when I was in high school, looking to which degree I was going to do, then after the degree, looking outwards, for me, there just seemed endless opportunities, endless options and opportunities. And for me, it was really about, well, which opportunities are you going to be brave enough to actually pursue? And through working on that bravery when I was younger, it meant, and I had help with that. I mean, I grew up in a small country town called Yeppoon. Well, it's on the coast, but it's tiny. And with that comes a sense of not deserving the same things that the metro girls all deserve, or people. So even trying to apply for my scholarship to go to Bond University, I was very hesitant to do so because I just felt like, no, there's going to be loads more people out there that are going to get a scholarship before me. I'm just this little country girl. Now, I was a country girl with straight A's that pulled an OP4. And was the top of my IT class.
Wait, let's just pause there. Yeah. That was amazing. Well done.
Yeah, well,
thanks. We should never bypass that. So that's amazing.
So but through the cheerleading of my physics teacher, he encouraged me to apply, and I did. But I was slapped down with the same crippling kind of complex when I finished that degree, topped that degree, and then was presented with the opportunity to apply for a graduate program, which was a nationally open graduate program to come and study, to work at DDB, one of our biggest ad agencies in Australia. And same thing, I was like, oh, no, I'm like this tiny little Queensland girl. That's not, there's lots of people out there. But again, but that time I didn't have anyone cheerleading me. I found the application form at 11 o'clock at night, the day it was due. And I was like, I don't know, should I? And so I found it in myself that time. And I remembered back to Mr. Mullane's advice about if you don't ask, the answer is no, which is my motto now. I've lived with that since then. And so I put in the application, went through the process. I imagine everyone will know the end of the story there, got in, ended up on their biggest account and so on and so forth. But with my 20s, I very much took what I learned about myself when I was younger and managed to keep drawing on that. And what I had drilled into me when I was younger, whether it was by my parents or my teachers or myself, was you are your own capacity. You are the one that's in charge of what you can do, what you can achieve. There are other forces at play, but you get to decide what you do with your influencing factors and your circumstances. And if you make the decisions to try and to push yourself and to get out of your comfort zone and to actually go for opportunities, then you will propel yourself forward. But also if you believe in your own capability. So when I applied for that graduate program, so I was 19 when I graduated because Bond does a fast track degree. When I applied for that, I was nervous and scared. And even at the interviews and stuff, I was a bit like, whoa, this is really a big deal. But at the same time, simultaneously in my head, I knew I was just as good as the other people there. And when I got picked for the graduate program, and the first day I was with 12 other people that had been selected from Australia and New Zealand. And I stood in that room, boy or girl or otherwise, and I was like, I know I deserve to be here. I've worked really hard. I'm good at what I do. And I know who I am. And I know what I can figure out if I don't know how to do it right now. And it was that internal kind of sentiment and I guess pragmatism a little bit that helped me through my 20s make decisions and take chances. Because I then went on, so I was at DDB for 2 years. I got poached by my old managing director to then go and take up the biggest account at McCann Erickson, which was MasterCard at the time. And then on a whim, after working 90,000 hours a week at the age of 22 or 23 or whatever I was, at a lunchtime, I walked up to, it was in King's Cross, was where our offices were. I walked up to the flight centre at King's Cross and booked myself a one-way ticket to London because I was done working ridiculous and I'd always wanted to go to London. I had my visa and everything. And I walked up, so I was 23 when I moved to London and threw myself into the belly of the beast with no job or accommodation or anything. But I got there, I muddied my way through it, ran out of money very quickly, muddied my way through it. And while there, changed careers into film and production and became a film producer when I moved into film production a couple of years after getting there. So I was late 24, but, walked into PMing my very first feature film at the age of 24. and then worked in film for a number of years. Then the financial crisis hit, had to move back to London, go back into advertising. But all throughout this, all through my 20s, what was propelling me forward was just an innate belief in myself and an innate belief, that I could do it.
So can I rewind the feelings of what you were actually feeling at that point in time? Because if I was to summarize, I was reflecting on my own feelings, and I was also recapping on my niece and how she feels often, and I summarized it in this, and I validated it with her this morning. I said, so did you feel the pressure of your own innate ambition that you had inside? Did you feel the pressure of that driving you forward?
Yeah, my self-expectations.
Yeah, and then the excitement for what's around the corner.
Oh yeah.
Did you at any point feel lost?
If I did, it's usually very short-lived because I'm a talker, and so I would either have a close friend or my mum or someone that I would go, I think I don't know what I'm doing. I think now I want to do this. I'm also quite a forward-thinking brain, so if I'm faced with something like, for example, the decision to move into film production was off the back of getting disillusioned in the ad industry and knowing I was passionate about, I'd always been passionate about film and storytelling. And there came a point in time where I was on that precipice of like, should I do it? Should I take the risk or not? And that's a moment of being lost a little bit where you
And that's what it is. That's the feeling of loss. Where you're just trying to make a decision between multiple options.
Yeah, and then how you go about making that decision is where things are usually done in kind of a healthier way, or the sitting in your room, freaking out, internalizing, going around in circles, and then making everything out to be way bigger and disastrous than it actually ever turns out to be. That's really the crossroads you get faced. And that's what, unfortunately, a lot of the younger generation at the moment have lost that confidence in their decision making and taking that risk and understanding that even if you take it and it doesn't work out the way you thought it was, everything you learn
is actually a blessing.
It goes towards
actually going to help towards your character.
And this is the really interesting bit. I think I've done some work with Fuel, and I've met a few of these amazing girls. And the first time I met the first group of the Fuel girls, there was a 13-year-old who we were doing a project together and we were booking in some next times to meet, and she pulls out her diary and she's trying to fit me in, and I couldn't believe it, and there's me. I'm a state manager, with this team, and I'm one of the busiest people I know, and she was literally, sorry, I don't have any availability for you for another 3 weeks. I'm like, you're 13, what are you doing? So I think, that pressure to have everything organized and know everything and have everything perfect and already to know what the outcome is going to be and be one step ahead constantly.
But also it's an obsession with preparing for any eventuality, which I think is crippling them at the moment. And I'm very careful not to talk to any of the young people I work with about this whole 20 careers in your lifetime thing, because I think that's insane to be telling them, because we all know that we ebb and flow and move and change, and that's fine. But if someone had sat you down when you were 15 or 20 or whatever it is and say, by the way, you're going to have 6, 7 different careers in your lifetime, how is that a comforting thing? If anything, it just freaks them out, going, well, I need to know everything and be good at everything and I need to learn how to code and I need how to whatever. And you kind of go, no. You know what you need to learn? Yourself. You have to figure out yourself. Figure out what you like and don't like, what you're good at and you're not good at. You spend time figuring those things out. They will lead you towards developing the skills that you are going to be naturally good at, the ones that maybe you have to improve, and then let that be your guide. Because then once you get out into the world and you have to make decisions and opportunities present themselves, then when you get out there, you'll be making decisions on the basis of knowing yourself and who you are. Yeah. No amount of extracurricular prep is going to give you that own self-understanding.
That's spot on. So I think, I was thinking about what you were saying earlier about that. I'm really fascinated with this Gen Z, and I really did not do a time sort of walk of, terrorism, financial crisis. So from day one, for a lot of these, late teens to 20-year-olds, they have been faced with a high sort of hype, alarmist, requiring to prepare themselves for every kind of situation.
And risk adversity
And
is the big
risk
thing we talk
adversity
about.
because they have to protect themselves. Why? Because the media and everything around them has been telling them to do so.
And they've watched their parents go through it. They've watched their parents lose people or be financially whatever. And then the world is constantly telling them through social media all this stuff is happening. So why, when you're told all the time that so much bad stuff happens and that good stuff only happens to the very select few who get to be a Kardashian or something ridiculous, then why wouldn't you sit in your room and freak out and be like, well, that can never, how am I going to, I'm drowning. You know, you drown when you sit in their world for a while and look around. We're all lucky enough that we've had,
We've got perspective.
How many years? Yeah, we have perspective. We've seen the world. We understand how it works. We understand the modicum of risk of things, but they don't, and that's why you've got even your niece and that sort of freaking out because
and trying to work out how am I going to 20-point checklist of what I'm going to do. But what I also told my niece is that look, I'm in my 30 something, and I still don't have it figured out. I know what I'm going to do right now for this year. I know, look, I'm actually an organizer. I'm actually quite clear on what I want and what I'm going to do. And I have myself figured out in decades. So I go, my 30s are going to be like this, look and feel a little bit like this. And as long as it's giving me happiness, which I only learnt in my 30s, I didn't learn that in my 20s, I'm just going to do it and go with it. I might take a little bit longer to make a decision. So I always tell Laura, I'm a bit of a fact person. So I have to, I need to be quite informed in what I'm doing or taking on. And that's just my, type A personality. I said, but, if I have thereabouts or I feel like I've solved enough proof points, just go with it. And I think that's the part where they're not comfortable, like you said, in their own instinct and their gut because they don't even have the chance to sit still in it. Yeah. Because they're faced with so much information from the outside. They're not working on the information that's flowing from what they've already experienced.
Their brains aren't even developed
enough, right? And that's the point. So Laura and I were talking this morning. We did some research and understanding. Okay, so we talked about how you're feeling. So how are you feeling in your 20s? What is your brain doing in your 20s? So I was really quite shocked to think, okay, so most people think, okay, the law says that I can drink when I'm 18, so I must be an adult. You get a key when you're 21, and for obviously other countries, it's 21 and on forth from there. But really, it's doing us a disservice because your brain actually isn't fully matured yet. You're still developing. Not that I'm a neuroscientist, but we do have someone coming on soon.
Who is?
Dr. Diane Hanna. But we are definitely in that space where we think we know it all and we should know it all. But technically, fundamentally, our brain is not developed. So our prefrontal cortex, which I love saying those words because it makes you feel smart. But really what it's about is that front part of your brain that actually does the communication and translation from left to right and back down in the deep parts of your back of your brain. It is actually still maturing its pathways. It's still passing on the information. It's still working out how to make it more efficient. The other part I read was that you're actually still improving heavily in your early 20s to 25, your actual ability for awareness, for judgment, and also for rational thought. And I was thinking, this is why, back to the feelings of, my nervousness, excited, but yet, doubtful, fearful, worry, loss, vulnerable, all of those feelings can cycle through your brain. And when I told my niece that this morning, she was like, oh my God, I feel so much better. Yeah. I was like, exactly. Now I need to go read what's happening in your 30s so I can feel a bit better about what's going on with me.
It's true. And I think if we look back, every year, I know from my life, and I'm technically still in my 20s until next week, and I think year on year, my perspective, it's like exponential effect. It just gets stronger and stronger and more real, and I start to understand myself so much more, but I'm certainly not there yet. So how can you expect yourself to be there at 20? Yeah. And the other thing is where I am now, I've had, 10, 12 years of living on my own, operating as an adult. When you're 20, you're kind of stepping into it for the very first time. So your brain's not developed, you're doing it for the very first time, but you're expected to go forth and be a human. Yeah. And it's incredibly overwhelming. I think what I would really like to know is what you would tell your 20-year-old self, Tanya.
Oh my goodness.
It was only 2 years ago, don't worry about it.
Well, look, my 20-year-old self. To be honest, my 20-year-old self did okay, but that's because I was told so many helpful things when I was younger than 20.
Yeah.
And I think those things, if I was to remind myself, if I was to tell a different 20-year-old self, I would say perspective and objectivity is really critical for staying balanced in your mind and in your emotions. If you can take a situation and something that you would emotionally react to and really just break down that situation first before you go crazy and understand the outside influencing factors, then you can stay a bit more rational in the moment and work your way through it. And you kind of save yourself from having lots of the crazy kind of highs and lows. Now, we all did regardless, no matter how pragmatic I pitched myself to be. There's drama always. But if you can try and stay grounded in the sense that you want to look at something that's just happened or a situation you're faced with as much objectivity as you can, and whether you talk that through with people. I was really lucky to have people like my mom and friends to actually talk that through. I think the second thing, I've got three things, if that's all right. So the first one, perspective and objectivity. The second thing would be really take the time to, I'll do the third one first. Pay attention to things around you. Now, obviously, we've touched on social media and how influence and stuff is unhealthy and things like that. And I don't mean that kind of pay attention. I mean, you learn how to operate in a world when you're actually paying attention to that world. So if you I don't like the whole put down your screens kind of lecture, but if you take the time to understand people and how they operate, understand what is affecting, like something my mum used to do when I'd come home and I went to an all girls school, so they were just, can I swear? They were bitch fights. They were bitch fights. Bitch fights like every day. And you'd come home, you're like, oh my God, da-da-da-da-da about some girl. And my mum, who, bless her, is Rhodesian and the most pragmatic person I know, the first thing out of her mouth would usually be something like, but what's going on with them? Like, why do you think they said something like that? And I would immediately would stop me and I'd be like, well, I don't know. She's just, I don't know. Well, I guess I guess her mum's kind of whatever. And I'd sort of know a bit of background of what's going on in the girl's life. And then over the course of the conversation, it would kind of be a bit like, shift your focus from how you've been made to feel about this whole thing and look at what's going on with either the person or the situation. And the more you can understand people and their motivations and their reactions, and the more you can understand how the world works and how society works and all the rest of it, the better you can kind of navigate it, and you can actually navigate people in your relationships. So the third thing, which is similar to that, but in a working environment, because a lot of these 20-year-olds are coming into jobs and things like that, is around tact learning. It's called tact learning. And tact learning, similar to osmosis, but what it is, it's about the passing of knowledge and information from someone who is more knowledgeable and more informed onto the next. So a big concern we have at the moment is that you've got lots of senior level people who are all retiring off, and the knowledge and information has not been passed on yet to middle management and lower management. So what we really need, the young generation who are coming through, and it just makes you a better, more employable person if you actually respect what you can learn from people who are more senior than you and have been around the houses, and they understand the jobs or the landscape or the whatever professional environment. Mm-hmm. So tact learning and osmosis and learning from your managers and things like that. I think we're just going to be faced with, again, going back to Gen Z and the way that they learn and integrate. If you think about it, all the kids these days, and even up to your niece and that, Google has been around 2000. Well, 2008 is when the iPhone came out, so everyone kind of uses that as the pinnacle marker. So these kids have been told time and time again, they'll ask a question and you'll say, go look it up. That's what everyone says. Go look it up. Go figure it out. Go find it out, right?
I do that. I say, go look at Dr. Google. Yeah. Do I look like Dr. Google? Go find it out.
Exactly, right? So that's fine because it's breeding independence and they're understanding how to problem solve and things like that. But the problem is, They're learning that they can go figure out the answers and they don't need to learn from others.
Oh, yeah, that's
And
fabulous.
so when you then have that generation coming into an environment that we're all used to, where you actually have managers and senior people and all the rest of it, the mindset that's coming in is, but if I don't know it, I can go figure it out. I don't need you to tell me. Yeah. And that's not, let's not write them off as just being arrogant. It's actually literally just how they've been brought up. Yeah. And we have to kind of give them that credit. So that's why I bring up the point around the importance of what you can learn, not only just the learning from managers, but that tact learning is about, I always tell any juniors I come in that work with me or for me, you're not allowed to wear headphones at work, because you need to listen. When I'm on the phone and having conversation, you listen to how I manage that phone call, the tone of voice, the way the words I use. That's kind of your tact learning. So the 20-year-olds and a lot of why I started Girl Shaped Flames was actually born out of inspiration from two 20-somethings in my life at the time. And one of them, I won't give too much information as to who's who, but one of them, incredibly talented, driven, hardworking, great work ethic, amazing girl, no confidence, would not ask for a pay rise, try and get a promotion, go out and network on behalf of the company, just would not. And I've spent years working with her to try and help her through that. Other end of the spectrum, I had a girl working for me who was fresh grad, 21 or whatever, and definitely knew way more than I did in my 20 years of experience, and was not shy of telling me how I was supposed to be doing my job, even though she was my exec, but didn't have the skills to back it up, didn't have the soft skills to back it up. And so it was in watching these girls who had arrived into their 20s and then watching them still not be able to navigate things very successfully, that I'd love to sit them down and say, let's remember pragmatism and objectivity. Let's remember paying attention. Stop talking for a second and listen to people and understand, things. And then learn from others, like learn from people who know more than you. And that is what prepares you to be the most solid, amazing version of yourself that you can.
Great advice.
I love that.
Great advice.
I really love it. You know what, mine is actually not too far of it, but you really did it justice in how you explained it and explained the backing behind it. I have a habit of doing the Dr. Google thing, which I'm now going to be aware of, by the way. But I think you're right on the social side as well. So given they're so used to their screens or being able to absorb everything that's going on globally, being able to communicate one-on-one and actually have some practical social experience is actually quite difficult. I had my nephew the other day tell me that he did really good in biology, really good in maths, but then when he had to do an actual oral for English, he thinks he failed. And I said, well, why do you think you failed? He goes, because I couldn't communicate it out. And that just goes down to that, the lacking of experience and exposure outside of your device, but actually with other people and listening. I love the headphone things because they have been encouraged to internalize so much because we're driving them to the devices.
So I was talking to my husband recently about he listened to another podcast which had a scientist, a researcher, and I can't remember his name, but he studies how humans interact with technology, that the impact that it's actually having on the human. Okay, when we automate and we do all of these things, and they're looking at Alexa. They're talking about Alexa, and the fact that you've got very toddlers asking Alexa to do things, and it's this really subservient relationship. And then the toddler goes into the playground and just tells the other toddler, give me that, or do that for me, or tell me what. And they're missing that human interaction. The problem is that by the time those kids get into school, it's harder for them to socialize, to get what they want through a transaction. They don't know how to negotiate as much as you negotiate at 4 years old, but they don't know how to do that and have that interaction. So they prefer to isolate themselves, and they prefer to just speak to Alexa at home. Why they don't, like you said, why would if someone can use Google and if someone can ask Alexa to do things for them, and to book things and to do, why would they have to speak to another human being? So I think it's very isolating. And, going back to something that you just said around learning and having your tribe around you. And you did so well in your 20s because you learnt off the lessons of people before you. There's no way I could have done 90% of the things that I've achieved without other people around me.
That's actually my number 4. I missed my number 4, which is about seeking advice, help and support. And that's the one thing I would actually tell my 20-year-old self back in the day, because I was just a little too bullheaded thinking I could do a lot of things myself without help. But it was as I got older and I started meeting some incredible women, particularly, and men, managers and things, but women, that I learned that if I actually did express to them a concern I had around something to do with my life or my pathway or something or other, that they would often bring really interesting perspectives that I could. So if I was to go back to my 20-year-old self, I'd be like, look, reach out a little bit more, like ask people for a bit more help, but find some consistency in who you ask, because what drives us crazy is if you end up like spinning, like actually you end up spinning. If you have if you're telling everyone your problems, you're getting 90 different opinions. And, we run businesses now and I run a business, and that's where I've gone really sideways, is asking everyone for advice. And then you have 90 different pieces of advice. But if you can have your consistent handful of people that not only you trust with knowing who you are as a person, so that their information that they give you is curated in line with who you are, but also they understand the intimacy, like the intricate details of your situation, so you're not having to explain every time. So if you, in your 20s, if you could find, that would be gold if you could find people like that to kind of help mentor you and be there as a support system.
The tribe support.
The tribe.
What would you tell your 20-year-old self?
Oh, well. So I think, I really thought long and hard about this, and I don't think I would change anything in my 20s, because I was listening to your story, Tanya, and it's amazing. And I was like, I had the same path, but completely different. So I went through and acted in the same behavior in the same way. I was quite determined with what I was going to do, but it wasn't because I was going into university, or I absolutely, from a educational perspective, knew that's what I wanted to do. I was actually quite the opposite, and quite an activist, and pig-headed, and wanted to do my own thing because I had no choice. And for me, I had to get money, and I had to make money quick, because it was that or where will you be? So I think for me, it was the same innate inner feeling and gut. You had to learn your gut instinct and how to read and listen to your own gut instinct, because I often was alone a lot. So being able to, I think still, what I would do is tell my 20 plus now, which I continue to do so, relax a little bit more. Be a sponge, which is to your point. Actually, I would definitely not be so guilty and not be so hard on myself when I did fall down and had a failure. I wouldn't stew on it for that long, because I actually remember I used to stew and regret a lot of things. Like if something happened at work, I was a manager at 23. So managing people, I would beat myself up quite a lot. But I was also quite hard-nosed. So I'm quite a tough person in the way I approach things in work and in life. And I think I'd be a lot more gentle on myself, therefore on other people, because I would have a lot more empathy. But again, I really can't say much because I only know this now. So therefore, relax, letting go quickly, moving on, less guilt, and knowing that you actually can experience, 7 careers or 100 million things in your 20s, because 10 years is actually quite a long time in your 20s. Then you got your 30s and 40s. Like, I have so much to look forward to that I now love it, that I am just like, it's okay. Whatever you're going to do, it's going to work out, whether you reach it in your 20s, your 30s, or your 40s. Try and focus on being happy and find that happiness, because time is, just precious.
Yeah. Amazing.
Laura?
Oh, okay. So I think I would tell my 20-year-old self to, first of all, it's going to be absolutely fine. Yes. Is what I would start with. Stop, don't freak out. You're going to be absolutely fine. And I think I wasn't at 20. I don't think I was a doomy gloomy. I was very excited about what life was going to throw at me, and I had big expectations, and I was just going to go out there and do it. I think I would say to myself, in that process, you are going to put pressure on yourself. I always had a fear that I was not going to see all the things I wanted to see, and I wasn't going to do all the things I wanted to do. And it kind of ended in my head at 30. It's almost like, you know.
Oh, because you proved it wrong.
No. As in, like, I used to sit and think, once you're 30, it's done.
Yeah.
You know, you've only got your 20s. Whereas actually I tell myself, no, I know.
What happens when you hit 30?
But I would tell myself at 20, you actually are just you're in the tiniest part of your life. Like if you looked at it if it was a 12-hour clock, you know, like and I don't know what the maths are on that, but you're probably sat, you're not even waking up for breakfast yet in the day is your life. Yeah. So just calm down. Would have been the first thing that I said. It's going to be okay, and take the pressure off. The second thing I think I would have told myself is, or what I wish that someone would have told me, and I'm pretty sure someone did, but I think it was my mum and I just ignored them, is for every alcoholic drink you drink and every cigarette you smoke and every time you do something bad to your body, that stuff's going to come back and bite you. So to be a bit more proactive in terms of wellness, as in physical wellness, mental wellness, like treat yourself with respect and treat yourself with kindness. Yes. And that's, you know, that's everything from physical well-being, mental well-being, health, just the fact that you are precious and you should be looking after yourself, even if you are 20 and think, oh, well, I don't need to worry about that just yet. You do, and you should. And I think the third thing I would tell myself is, you're going to fail, it's going to feel awful, but after which you're going to just be so proud of yourself for failing because you'd have learned so much along the way. So embrace the failure as it comes and as it hits you, because you're going to learn so much through it.
I love that one, and I really miss that one, because that is probably my biggest learning, because every time I make a decision and I go down this path of going, I think this is the decision, this is the right way to go, and I'm making a decision with my head rather than my gut instinct, I end up going back to what my gut was telling me. So you just take the longer path around. And it's okay, because these things just keep coming to you as lessons. So you may feel like it's a failure, but actually no, everything is going to be a lesson to bring you back to where you need to be. So failure is okay.
Oh, absolutely.
And character building.
Jump into it, completely embrace it. Well, thank you. I think we've covered a lot. And hopefully for any 20-year-olds that are listening have got something to take away, and just to know that it's going to be absolutely fine.
And you're
doing awesome.
And you're doing good.
You're doing good. Thank you.
Thank you very
Tanya,
much.
for coming.
Thanks for having me.